Want to learn how to read tarot? Or deepen an existing tarot practice? In this video, let me show you one way to do a past, present, future spread. Keep watching. Hi, it's Leia. Welcome to this episode of Diaries of a Witchy Creative Life. In this video, as I said in the intro, we will be learning one way how to do a past, present, future spread. It's based on my particular method that I use. So if you haven't seen the video, How to Read Tarot Cards Instantly, yet, please go ahead and watch it because it will give you more of an idea, even though I will explain a little bit here as well about that. Also, the video that I uploaded prior to this one uses the past, present, future spread. So if you want to see an example of that in action, go ahead and take a look at that as well. But for sure, what we will be doing in this video is one example in and of itself. As with that one video I mentioned, which is the first in this series that I started on how to read tarot for beginners, we will be using The Lightseer's Tarot by Chris Ann. I might switch things up in this series and use different decks along the way, or I might use the same one. Let's see how I feel about it. Okay, so if you already watched How to Read Tarot Cards Instantly, let me answer some questions first that might have come up for you after watching that. Some of you may be wondering, what's the reading part of this whole process? If your client or the person you're reading for does a lot of the work, meaning unlike a more typical old school reading where the reader tells the sitter or client a lot of stuff about what's going on in their life, etc. This style of reading I'm sharing with you has the sitter or client telling you a lot of that themselves. So yeah, you may be wondering, where are you actually giving them a reading? I did explain it in How to Read Tarot Cards Instantly, but I will specify here that the reading part is you guiding them with helpful questions. Your job, what you're reading, is the flow of energy. You're the facilitator who helps your sitter come to terms with what could be hard truths. Because we're doing shadow work here. We're diving beneath the surface of our conscious mind and taking a look at what we might not have accepted or what's not so obvious to us, which of course is affecting our lives nevertheless. So having an awareness of that helps us cope better, helps us live better. So as the reader with this kind of reading, because it isn't predictive, okay? If I haven't mentioned that yet and you're new here, this style of reading that I'm sharing with you isn't predictive. It's more about self-awareness, not the more famous fortune-telling method that's associated with tarot. So you might have to tell stories or give examples to help your sitter or your client gain more clarity. That's the reading part of it. Even if you don't do what old school readers did, which is tell your client, this is what happened or what's currently happening, and you're asking them instead to share about how what appears on the card relates to their lives. There's actually still a lot of work that falls into this kind of reading. You're not just letting them do all the work, even though they are taking more responsibility and playing a bigger part in it than the sitter or client did in a lot of old school style readings. So in a different video, we'll be focusing on these questions that it's up to you as the reader to formulate after you see what cards have been pulled. But in this one, let us focus on what I promised, doing a past, present, future spread that isn't predictive. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna pull 3 cards. The first card stands for the past. The next one stands for the present. And the third stands for the future. Okay, so let's take a look at how we would do this sort of reading, which is very time-based, but not in a predictive style. And before I flip the cards over, I want to invite you to use what comes up on the cards for you to do your inner work with as well. If you want, don't just use this as a teaching video. Take what comes up on the cards as a reading for you so that you can ponder upon these or journal about them. Okay, so let's start. The card for the past is the Eight of Swords. So how you're going to do this is, once that you know the meaning of the cards, and in that video that I mentioned earlier, how to read tarot cards instantly, I actually said go right ahead and open up the book. And you see, out of everything that's written there, what stands out to you, or you ask your client what stands out to them. If you're a beginner looking at this, you can do that here as well. If you're curious about how to incorporate the self-awareness shadow work approach into your tarot practice instead of doing it the predictive way, what you're going to do is review the meaning of the card for a moment. Okay, so Eight of Swords. This, I would say, is about being stuck or thinking that you're stuck, using excuses to not move forward, having an old narrative that keeps you where you are instead of where you want to be or where you say you want to be. And then once you have that meaning, you share it with your client or sitter and you ask them how it applies to what that card stands for. And in this case, that is the past. So in a predictive style reading, somebody would be telling their client what they think or what intuitively comes to them associated with the meaning of the card in terms of events in the client's life, things that have already happened, etc. But in this case, let me ask you, as if I'm the one who's giving you a reading, have you noticed any patterns based on past experiences where you tend to feel like you're stuck, or you tend to make excuses not to move forward? What's an old narrative that you have that could be running the show, keeping you from getting to where you want to be? It could be that it's time for you to face that now. Time for you to be honest with yourself about it so that you can finally work on achieving the goals that you have for yourself. And if you find it particularly challenging to do so, what you can examine is, what is the resistance? Is there anything that maybe you're afraid of? That's why you keep yourself in this position of not moving forward. Focusing maybe on the reasons why it can't happen or you can't do this, instead of thinking of solutions. Because being more solution-oriented opens up your mind and your eyes to the possibilities instead of keeping you closed to them, which is what happens when we make excuses all the time. So with no judgment, no beating yourself up for doing that, go ahead and take a look at it so that you can work on that and begin to move forward, even if it means taking baby steps. A lot of huge changes can be scary, so that's okay. But you're doing this for you because you want change and you want to do better, regardless of what area in your life that refers to. Okay, and at that point, your client can tell you or share with you what has come up for them after you ask those questions, or guide them in that way. And depending on how long your agreed time is, you can talk a lot more about that, or keep it more concise and move on to the next card. So our card for the present is number 20 from the Major Arcana, Judgment. What we do here is the same, but applied to the present instead of the past. So after you chew over the meaning of the card, now you translate it into something that your client can contemplate. So let's say the meaning of judgment that I'm going to focus on here would be having greater clarity or greater understanding, seeing things much more clearly than you used to. How I could translate that into something you can contemplate would be, currently, where might you be experiencing a greater understanding? And we could explore any aha moments when we were talking about the past card, now that we are discussing the present. And then at that point, your client tells you what their thoughts or ideas, feelings are. For some people, it will even be memories. And you go from there. The questions that you ask depend on what they say, because you are guiding them, specifically based on what they say or what comes up for them. And you help them through that process. And since I think you get the idea, we're not going to stay too long here because, like I said, it's very specific to what comes up for whoever you're reading. And we can move on to card number 3, the future. It's the 7 of Pentacles. Oh my gosh. How challenging is it to put it in the little slot, huh? By the way, before we fully move on to the future card, let me say, if you're using this as a reading for yourself right now and not just as a lesson and you're actually thinking about all this and or journaling, etc., I'd like to add, for the present, you could make a list of patterns in the past that you've broken through or broken free from because you realized that they weren't serving you. Which is a very fitting thing because, after all, the first card did talk about there being patterns in the past where you might have felt like you were in bondage, or to put it simply, stuck. Okay, so moving on, for the future card, the 7 of Pentacles is about stopping, pausing, reflecting after you've already put in the work, and now it's time to step back. So how could you possibly relate that to the future? Let me give an example. What area or areas of your life do you see yourself taking a break in the near future, or needing a break, more accurately, because some of us don't allow ourselves to take breaks? And this card right here could be a reminder that, yeah, you will be needing to rest pretty soon. There's nothing more that you can do at that time except to be in the flow and allow other elements to fall into place. And like I said earlier, of course, the answers will differ depending on who you're talking to, but let's say someone says, oh, that would definitely be in the area of work. I'm about to finish my role in this project that I've been working on for months. It isn't finished yet by any means. Like, when I'm done with my part, somebody else still has to work on it and contribute with their own specialty. But I'm gonna have to step back and allow them to do that. And I feel like I'm just gonna be twiddling my thumbs while I wait for them to finish. My mind is still gonna be on it even though I'm not actually working on it. And this is where you, as the reader, help them to see what they can do instead, which is for their well-being. To help them take a break and pause in a way that's beneficial for them. And this is the part as well where you could even link the cards to give them more of a bigger picture. Taking that same example, you could say, how do you see what you're feeling about taking that break in the future? Being connected to old patterns. And how has that worked for you in the past? So when you read these cards, you actually read them all together. They don't just have to be read one by one. You could bring up the past and present even if you were talking about the future card, if anything about them is relevant to the future. In closing, you want to end on an uplifting note. You want to give your clients something to take action on that benefits them and is aligned with who they are and their personal goals. I had mentioned in How to Read Tarot Cards Instantly that you don't give advice based on what you think is right or what works for you. That's a pretty big topic, but just to sum it up, the questions you ask your client are ideally about what they can do that is, like I mentioned, aligned with their personal goals, their personal beliefs, their personal values. And by all means, they can keep thinking of the questions you asked them and relate them to other areas of their life that might not have come up while you were in the middle of the reading. So these readings are a gift that keeps giving, because if they had a recorder on or they wrote anything down, they can keep going over these questions at a later time. See how they've grown since they got the reading. Well, anyway, we could keep going on and on and on because readings are multi-layered and whatnot, but we are gonna stop here. This is supposed to be for beginners after all, so I don't want to put out there any more than anyone can chew. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. It gives me so much pleasure to share my personal method with those of you who resonate with it. I'll be back soon with more shadow work, tarot, inner awareness, inner growth sort of content. So stay tuned and do subscribe if you haven't yet so that you don't miss a thing. Take care. Bye for now. Lots more exciting Diaries of a Witchy Creative Life coming your way.